And we're going to be doing these every Tuesday at 5:30. And we'll give you a little teaser at the end of this one about who's coming up next month, or next week, excuse me. We're going to mute all of you for now, and then as we get towards the end, if you have questions, we'll open up so we can have some interaction between you and our guest tonight. Just a tiny bit of background. The Education Trust, one of their programs is called the Real World Project, and we brought a whole number of interesting speakers into the high school to talk about their careers and things they did well and things they didn't do so well. And as this craziness started, we decided and we talked a bit about it and thought it might be interesting to modify this just a little bit, because there are a lot of simply fascinating people that live in this town, and lots of people don't know they're even here, or they might know them as friends, but don't know what they really do for a living. And so that's kind of the impetus for this project. So I'm really pleased tonight to introduce you to our special guest, Beth Wheat. Beth and I are going to talk a bit about her background and some of the interesting things that she's done. So thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy getting to meet Beth Wheat. Beth, let's start this way. Why don't you go back a number of years in your case and talk a little bit about your family, your mom and dad. Did you have brothers and sisters? And maybe talk about your experience in schools through high school. And if there were significant people that appeared during that period of your life, maybe talk a little bit about who those were, okay? So Beth, it's your turn. You want to talk a bit about that part of your life?
Yes, thank you very much, Phil. And thanks everybody for joining this very first Getting to Know You. And hopefully you'll enjoy this. And there'll be, as Phil said, many other great people coming. So I think, Tori, do you want to share the slides?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. We have visual aids, so I can remember my life, because as Phil said, there's a number of years involved now. So there we go. Just let it in. So there's little me. I don't have a lot of pictures of myself when I was little. We had 3 house fires when I was growing up, 3 complete burned everything to the ground house fires. So, and that had a lot to do with kind of the quirky upbringing, which I'll probably touch on a little bit. But this was, I think I was about 4 years old. And this was in my tap dancing and singing phase, when I used to put Tupperware bowls on my head and dance around the kitchen. I think we have some film somewhere that survived of me with said bowl on my head. But needless to say, I was definitely a child that loved music. I grew up in Anaheim, California, and my mother was a very gifted musician. She was a child prodigy. She started performing when she was 4 on piano, and grew up to tour across the country and do radio shows in the 40s. And she fell in love with jazz in New Orleans and kind of switched from sort of the big band to jazz, which is eventually what drew her to California, because at the time she played the Avalon Ballroom in Catalina. There was a huge jazz scene there, as there was in Newport Beach. So we lived in Anaheim, and my mom continued to work in entertainment for the better part of my life. And she also did orchestrations and music for musical theater companies. And oftentimes I can recall the performers would come. She had the ability to rewrite the music in the key for their voices and transpose everything, which was a big deal before computers. Like, she had the composition papers all spread out on the dining room floor, writing the dining room table, writing the music for everybody. And they would come over and perform their songs. And I remember just loving that. So got involved in theater myself all the way through school and into high school and into college. Not sure what we have next for the picture, Tori, if you want to go to the next one. Oh, so this one, and some of you might have seen some of these on Facebook. This was when I was a junior in high school. And interestingly, this was taken the morning after the second total house fire. And the only thing I had, because I put my drill team uniform in the car, was my drill team uniform and my drill team sweats that we used to wear to practice in the morning. So I luckily had my uniform for picture day, and I had my drill team sweats for school that day. And life carried on. But I always think of that when I see this picture. Drill team was really fun. It was a drill/dance team, and we marched in parades, and we did halftime shows and dance shows. So
What high school did you go to, Beth?
Oh, I went to Magnolia High School, which is in Anaheim. And you had asked about influential people. And I of course, my mom, just being the brilliant musician and scholar that she was very influential. My dad was as well. And he, to me, was unconditional love. I know some of you have had the chance to meet him. He used to come up and help build sets for cats. And my sisters, I have 3 older sisters. My parents were pretty dysfunctional. They had great hearts and they loved us, but they just weren't really very parental. So my sisters, all 3 of them, decided that they were going to raise me, which was a little oppressive sometimes, but in the end, it was amazing for me. They're truly my heroes. So they were very influential. And at Magnolia High School, I had an English teacher named Marietta Owsley, who's also my journalism teacher. And she was incredibly influential, incredibly supportive, and encouraged me to write and perform and express. And it was just great to have that growing up.
So it sounds like both of your parents were involved in entertainment, and that planted those seeds really early in your life. Is that right?
Well, my dad actually had his own construction business, but he loved music, and that was how he met my mom. He met her, he stalked her after a performance and got to meet her. And at the time, she had my 3 sisters who were, we call them Irish triplets, because they're 10 months apart and 11 months apart. So they, all these babies. And he was younger than she was, and she was on her own, and he stepped in and took care of my sisters as though they were his own. And that's the way it was for the rest of his life. But that's really how they got connected. But he was always our biggest fan. So he played that role.
These fires, that just a quirky circumstance?
Well, the combination of alcohol and cigarettes is not a good one. And I think that's really what it was. And it wasn't me smoking and drinking at that point.
So you're not smoking or drinking at that time? Is that the deal?
Not in high school, no.
So you're now a high school graduate.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that next 3 or 4 years in your life. Did you go to college? Did you go to work? Some combination? What happened?
Yeah, so after that 3rd house fire, I got my own apartment. I was 16 years old, and I had myself emancipated. I decided I didn't want to be in house fires anymore. And my parents were very supportive of that. So when after I graduated high school, I did go to college, but I also started working at a company called TRW, which was a very large corporate conglomerate. And one of their divisions was called Information Services. They were located in Orange, and to get the job, you had to be a fast typist. So I got the job, and my job was processing credit applications. And I did that, and then I went to Cal State Fullerton and declared as a theater major, started theater classes. So I was doing that, supporting myself and going to college. And I found out that TRW had a program where they would pay for my college if I took business or computer science related classes. So that was what really shifted my life. And I stayed working for TRW for 13 years, got into computer science and information technology. And I ended up getting into management at a very young age, and stayed there until my 2nd child was born.
Interesting. So really, those of you that are listening, kind of think about that. initial thing, because that theme will come back later in Beth's life. So
Yeah.
really at 18 or 19 years old, you're on your own.
Mhm.
You're working and going to school the best that you can. That kind of encapsulates that period of time. Did you get your college degree then, Beth?
I did. I got a degree in computer science, a 2-year degree in computer science, and I got most of my. Well, I finished my bachelor's degree later at University of Redlands after I'd moved to Big Bear.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So let's talk about from working for TRW, being out on your own, ending up in Big Bear. Can you talk a little bit about that transition for us?
Yes, at TRW, I met Daryl Gardner, and he, as a young boy, had spent a lot of time in Big Bear camping, and also in other places. But his family was very much all about the outdoors, so he always loved Big Bear. And when Matt was born, my first son, I was still working for TRW. I had a pretty significant role with the company, and I was traveling a lot. Back then, it was all domestic travel, but I was gone a lot, and I kind of had that notion that I was going to be the super mom and do it all. I can remember before Matt was born, someone asking me, "Are you going to go back to work after your baby's born?" And I said, "Of course." Like I didn't even give it a second thought. And then you have this baby, and we had a nanny and all of that, and I just remember being so sad that I had to leave him so much. So when we decided that Matt needed a brother, which, we didn't consult Matt on that, by the way, but we decided he needed a brother. He had other opinions at the time. I said to Daryl that I didn't want to work full time anymore. I just didn't want to miss all those moments with another child. And so I said, whatever you want to do, but I want that flexibility. So he said, I want to move to Big Bear. I want to build a house and move to Big Bear. So that's what got me here. And then after about 6 months of being home with 2 young babies, I started thinking, I just washed this dish and I just folded this same towel. And right about then the phone rang, and it was TRW, and they said, we're rewriting our credit system. We want you, we need you, name your terms. So I went back to work for them on a part-time basis as a consultant. And it turned out that for me, that was bliss. I had a great work challenge. I had, a good income from that. And then I had a lot of flexibility with being home with my boys, being able to have Jack go to the co-op preschool where I met, some really nice families like the Wainers and the Carpenters. And so that was a great arrangement, a great time in life for sure.
So really, working at home is nothing new for you, because you've been doing that in one form or another most of your life, huh?
It's very true. Yeah, for a long, long time. Yeah.
So when I think about your time here in Big Bear, I sort of categorize it your work with the Lighthouse Project, your work as a teacher at Big Bear High School, and then weaving through all of that was your involvement in cats. So maybe we could talk about each one of those a little bit. Let's start with your work with the Lighthouse Project. Can you talk a little bit about that and the kinds of things you did at that time?
Definitely. So the Lighthouse Project came about because when I was volunteering a lot in the classrooms when the boys were little. And over time, I stopped doing my consulting work for TRW and other companies. And the school superintendent at the time, Alan Pelletier, was our neighbor. He lived down the street from us. And I was out pulling weeds in the yard one day, and he stopped his car and he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about this new program that I think you'd be great for. It's called Healthy Start, and we're just getting it started. Fabulous woman named Tanya Perry is leading it up, and we're hiring family advisors, and I think you'd be great." So I said, okay. And I interviewed, and Tanya and I clicked, and I started to work as a family advisor, which was a phenomenal opportunity to support students and their families. Anything that a child was struggling with, really, they'd be referred to us, and we would round up support for them. and I recognized that how much challenge children can have with social issues, with bullying and not feeling like they fit in. So I had done a presentation to the school board, and Tim Wood happened to be at that school board meeting, but I had done a presentation about a program called Peace Builders that I thought would be good for the schools. So Tim had been looking for a way to give back to the community, and he wanted it to be something that was focused on children and very positive. So Ron Peavy brokered a meeting between Tim Wood and I, and with that we started the Lighthouse Project, which had the motto, building a child honoring community, and we ran many programs to help support the health and well-being of parents and children in the community. And of course, the Lighthouse Project continues today. And in essence, it's because I'm on the board of the Lighthouse Project that this Big Bear Connected idea was born, because at a board meeting, we were asked to advise the Mountaintop Strings program around whether or not they needed to cancel their concert as a result of our pandemic party. And so I thought there's got to be another way for those students that are disappointed because they're missing their performances. There has to be another way that we can bring people together. And so a few friends got together and talked about the concept, and here we are, and it's growing and growing.
Interesting. So now you end up teaching English at Big Bear High School. How the heck did that happen?
Well, that was interesting because the Lighthouse was a passion project, and I wanted to, after working in Healthy Start, and really one of the wonderful things about that job was that I was able to go into classrooms like Scott Wayner's and Marianne Lewis's and Pam Reams. And I was based at Big Bear Elementary, and I know there are many other fabulous teachers in this community that could be named, but I watched these masterful teachers doing what they did best. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And again, Lisa Hahn was another one. All of them really encouraged me to go for it. So I went back to school again. I got a bachelor's degree from University of Redlands in environmental science. And then I went back to school again and got a master's degree in multicultural education and a teaching credential. And I was lucky enough to do that at a time when there were openings, and Kevin Ambergy believed in me and gave me my first shot. And and he decided for me that I was going to teach 5th grade. So Scott was my teaching partner, and he handed me the keys. It was 3 days before school started. He handed me the keys to one of those portables at the end of Big Bear Elementary. And I opened the door and it was like, if you had a set designer design a haunted house, it was like that. There were cobwebs and, spooky things. And I had 3 days to get my classroom ready. And I looked out at the field. At one point I'm cleaning, and I looked out at the field thinking, what am I going to do? And here comes Dr. Al Wayner charging across, followed by a whole cotillion of other Wayners, next generation Wayners, with their scrub buckets. And Scott showed up with a toolbox, and the Wayners helped me put my first classroom together. So another, heartwarming story of the way people in this community just help out. And I just fell in love with teaching. I loved it.
How long did you do 5th grade, and how did you end up at the high school?
I'm not a very sensible person. So I taught 5th grade for 1 year. Then I had a 5-6 combination. And then the next year I had a 4-5-6 combination, and Tori was in that class. And then at that point, I moved to the high school after that. So I went back and got the English credential required, and went over to the high school for an open English position that was there. And I did that for 4 years. So that, I did at least that for that. I actually did the same thing for a few years and sort of got my footing under me. But the elementary years were pretty turbulent. They were fantastic and fun, but there was no rest.
Weaving through all of your time in Big Bear was your involvement with cats. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience with that whole thing, please?
Yes, but
For
because
those of you that don't know, by the way, Cats is a theater group that was in Big Bear and a prominent thing for a number of years. And Beth, you can talk about that.
Yeah, love to. But I want to go one more slide back if we can, Phill, because one of the things that got me interested in performing again, and that was going way back to the high school and college days, was that after my children were born, I started reading books to them, of course, and I would do puppet shows and do all the voices. And after a while, they would say, "Mom, just read it normal." So I couldn't do that anymore. But I found another outlet. I was helping Charlene Stallcup with co-op, as we all did, because if your children went to co-op, which is legendary in Big Bear, all the parents worked. That's what made it work. And I was volunteering in Matt's kindergarten class. Liz Uppenlotz was his teacher. So I was reading books to all these children, and St. Patrick's Day came around and I wanted to read a St. Patrick's Day story, and I couldn't find anything at the library. This was back when you had to go to the library to find books. There was no Amazon. And so I mentioned this to Liz Uppenlotz. I said, "I'm sorry, Liz, I really wanted to do something for St. Patrick's Day, but I couldn't find any stories for the children." And she said, "Well, why don't you write one?" So I went home that night and I wrote this little story called The Legend of Liam the Leprechaun. And it turned into a thing, which is the thing that you see on the left, which is me as a rather large leprechaun. But I started performing the story, and I did that for North Shore Elementary, where Matt was. And then Charlene invited me to do it for the co-op. And I did that for a number of years. And Charlene devised this whole setup where she would tell the children that a leprechaun was coming, and she would get them distracted looking around the classroom for them. And then I would magically appear from the back. So they really did think that I was a magical giant leprechaun. So that was super fun. And it also, as I said, kind of rekindled my desire to perform. And somewhere in that time frame, I'm trying to think of what year it was. I went to go see, first of all, I went to see a few shows at the PAC that were the precursor to Cats. They were produced by Sarge and others, and they were amazing shows. One of them was Amal and the Night Visitor, which Taran Killam, who's now a pretty famous guy, and his beautiful mother, Chris Light, were in. And all of that, of course, too, made me think, oh, I really want to do this again. So they had auditions for Brigadoon, and I auditioned for that show, but I ended up turning it down because the boys were really little at the time, and the rehearsal schedule was intense. And then the theater was condemned for a while because of damage that was sustained during the earthquake. So they took a little hiatus. The kids got older. They put up Brigadoon, and I went out for it again, and all of us were involved. And Matt and Jack were, little tykes, and it was a lot of fun to see them. Kim was in that show. Kim Boda was in that show, and her baby had just been born, who's now a young man, and I used to hold him in the wings when she would do her numbers so he could listen to her sing from the wings. So wonderful memories there. And if you want to go to the other slide, Tori, so I did a lot of stuff with cats, and that time is very precious to me, and I honor everybody that was involved, and I'm so grateful for it. And I know too that it really influenced Matt and Jack as they were growing up. But this was our cast of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. We added some characters since the Broadway show didn't have quite enough, but there's a lot of notable, beautiful faces in here. If you know this generation of Big Bear youngsters. There's a little Tory lurking in there somewhere. So that was one of the shows that I had the privilege of directing, and I wrote grants, did marketing, and I had the chance to play a lot of roles and do some really wonderfully creative things. So that was a big part of life in Big Bear for us.
So you have two boys,
Yes.
you're teaching, everything's cool.
Mhm.
Get ready for another radical change in her life.
Yes.
Away you go to join Experian. Talk to us about that transition and talk to us about that company, because I think some people may know a little bit about it, but maybe not realize what a large international company that is. So can you start there with that?
Sure. Like I said, I'm not a very sensible person, and it turns out that going into teaching, when you're in your 40s is not necessarily the best idea because it takes a while, to build up your pay. And I also joined when the economic collapse happened. I started teaching, and we had furlough days, and so I was up here trying to support myself and support my boys. Matt was getting ready to start college, and there was all that expense to help out with. And so I wasn't going to make it on a teacher's salary, as sad as that was. And I thought, well, I can go back to doing some consulting work. And Experian had put out what's called an RFP, request for proposal, for a cultural change management program director. And it was similar to the work that I had done with Lighthouse, but obviously more corporate related. So I bid on that contract, and I filtered it through a good friend of mine who I had worked with at TRW, which, by the way, forgot to mention that TRW dissolved as a corporation in the early 90s, and then the credit services branch became Experian. So I had friends there still. So she floated the proposal, and it was accepted, but they offered me a full-time position instead of contracting. So I made a really tough decision to leave Big Bear, which I did do for I was gone for about 6 years. And that's how I got back into Experian. Experian, I think a lot of people might be familiar. Most people think of it as the credit reporting company, which it is one of three. There's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. But we do a lot more than just credit reporting. We provide all kinds of data services. We have what's called business to business. So that's where we provide information to lenders and banks and other businesses, retailers, and so forth. And then we have business to consumer, which is where we provide information and support directly to consumers. We do all kinds of things, just helping clients better understand their portfolio, doing risk management, fraud and identification theft management. We do that for businesses and for people, and a lot of data analytics. So it's a company that's really evolving, and I'm really happy and proud to be there.
And it's an international company with about how many employees?
About 17,000 employees. And about 2 weeks ago, we pivoted to, I got an update today. Prior to the pandemic, about 20% of our people worked from home, myself included. And as of today, 99% of our workforce is working from home. It was magnificent, monumental shift. And very, very glad that the leadership of our company did that so quickly, because I think we've had globally 3 people that have been diagnosed. So it's working.
So you're one of a number of vice presidents in this company.
Yes.
And you have a fancy title that you've explained to me several times what you do, and I haven't gotten it yet. So let's see if this group is better than I am. Can you tell us what you do all day?
So my fancy title is Transformation and Engagement, and I work for, so it is a global company. We are in countries all around the world. We have a global CEO who's the number one guy who reports to the board. Then we have a COO who's our chief operating officer, and then my boss is the chief information officer, and so he oversees all global technology for the company. So what I'm doing, what I'm transforming is helping our company transform into digital ways of working. So transitioning from manual processes to automated processes, and leaning out those processes using a methodology called Lean Six Sigma, and automating with something that's called robotic process automation, which is basically software and machine learning that can learn how to do rule-based work that takes time of people but not intellect. So giving the non-intellectual work to process robots instead of having people waste their time on it. Essentially, they can do higher level work, more challenging and satisfying work.
And you travel a lot, as I understand it, all over the world, literally, right?
Yes, it's been fantastic to be many countries in Europe. I've had the chance to go visit for work, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica. So I haven't been to Asia Pacific yet. May be able to do that in the future, but it's been fantastic to go and have a chance to meet people in different offices around the globe, and we all have something in common working for the company, and it's just, I love working globally. I love the mix of cultures and backgrounds, and it's very, very fulfilling for me.
Cool. Just a sidelight, bring us up to date on your two sons. What are they doing now?
So Matt has been also traveling the globe. He's been working, oh, there we all are. This was back when we could all get together. Oh, he's been working for a company called Pure Praxis, which does training for the military using improvised drama. And predominantly they teach sexual assault and harassment prevention. And they do that by creating scenes and situations, and the actors act those out, and then stopping the action and talking to the observers, whether it's the military. They actually did one of their performances for Big Bear High School, which was amazing to see. And the observers, the audience, can actually say, well, what would have happened if he or she had handled it this way? And the actors will reverse the action and improv the scene with their direction. So it really, it's much more impactful than, PowerPoint slides or videos of people talking about, what sexual harassment is and why you shouldn't do it. It really is very visceral and emotional. So he's been doing that, but he also just fairly recently received his private pilot license, and very soon here he'll be starting commercial aviation school. So he's making a switch.
Sounds like his mom.
Yes, maybe not quite. So he's a little more sensible than I am, I should say. But yeah, it's exciting. And Jack is, as we speak, on duty with Big Bear Fire Department. He is a fire paramedic, first responder, helping keep all of us well and safe.
Beth, and I don't want to embarrass you, but you and I have worked on a number of projects together, and I'm always struck with the fact that it seems to me that you're one of the kindest people that I know. That we've got into some difficult situations, and it seems like I'd probably use a profanity, and you handle where does that come from? How does that work for you?
Gosh, I think, as I said, my parents, for all their faults, and everybody's parents have faults, right? Were incredibly loving people. My dad especially was just so unconditionally loving. And I think it probably comes from there. My paternal grandmother, my dad's mother, was also incredibly loving, and she was a big influence on me. Actually, my first job was working for her. She owned a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise, and I started working there when I was 11. I used to have to hide when, like, the inspectors would come in. But she was amazing. So I think it's really like anything. It's good modeling, and I think also having done spiritual work and recognizing that we really are all beings of love. You just have to let that out. Has made a difference for me too. But thank you, Phill. That is a little embarrassing.
Well, that's all right. Finally, before we open it up, are there people that you're reading or listening to now that you would recommend to the rest of us as people that were influential in a position that you're in?
Oh, well, Ernest Holmes and the Science of Mind is a fantastic book for anyone. I also love The Four Agreements, which is by Don Miguel Ruiz. Those are kind of philosophical, spiritual / books that that I would highly recommend. I'm always reading, and of course, right now, since we're not going anywhere, I have a whole bunch of books. I'm reading a couple of fiction books. One is called She's Come Undone by Wally Lamb, which is a fascinating, delightful novel. I'm reading another one called In Search of Bridget Coltrane, which is a mystery by Seamus Byrne. And right now, I'm reading a book called The Right to Happiness by Samantha Shad, and that's about using writing stories to help shape your life. And I'm just getting into it, but it's kind of how, her theory is that stories are how human beings attach meaning. We find patterns, and we put those patterns into stories to find meaning in things. And that by writing your own stories, not necessarily for sharing, but just writing stories about predicaments that you have, or problems you're trying to solve, you can actually stimulate parts of your brain and make progress that you might not otherwise. This one's really good. Yeah.
Sorry, can you drop the picture and show us all the folks? There you all are. Well, it's your turn. If you, there's about 12 of you out there. If you'd like to ask Beth a question or have her expand on something, if you'd wave your hand or something, and Tori will unmute you and you'll be welcome to ask her a question. So have at it. Anybody? Nancy, go ahead.
Oh,
Tori, can you unmute Nancy?
I'm clicking.
I got it.
There
I
you
got
are.
it. Beth, when you talked about your mother singing with big bands and being in Newport Beach, did she sing with Stan Kenton at all at the Rendezvous Ballroom?
I believe that name sounds very familiar. I believe so.
Because my mother used to go dancing there all the time.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be something?
Yes. What was her name, her stage name or her name?
Her name was Sally Smith.
Sally Smith. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to look her up.
I know it's hard to find things. If you find anything, let me know.
I will.
She had records, which of course were lost in the fire. So we don't have those, but she did make some, she made a few records. But she did more radio shows and played ballrooms.
That's interesting. And then I have an aunt, Margaret, who sang on the radio too. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That isn't. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank
Others
you.
of you that have questions for Beth? What? Yeah, Susie, go ahead.
Okay, what's next, Beth?
Well, we're busy because now I have Randy, who's another influential person in my life, and we've started Chirp in the village, and so I don't really do anything but give moral support, but we have that going on. Still very much involved with Experian, and then Big Bear Connected, and I don't know where this will go, but it's really been a pleasure for me to help kickstart it, and actually to work with Tori in another capacity, although I'm still waiting for her to wear the Woodstock suit. We have to arrange for that. Just is wonderful to be collaborating with her again. And I definitely, the Big Bear Theater Project is a passion for me too, and always support whatever they're up to. So for now, that's probably enough. And the dogs.
Thank you.
Others of you that have questions for Beth? Sander, how are you, Sander? Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So just one question for Beth would be, if you could go back in time and give yourself a message at 18 years old, what would that be?
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Do not doubt. And this is you're not 18 anymore by any stretch, but same thing. And you've actually done a great job of that. You've taken the road less traveled, and that's worked out for you. Mm-hmm. So I would say, so many people have self-doubt, and for me, in some ways that was crippling, because I took a lot of safe choices instead of inspired choices.
Someone once told me, let someone else say no to you. Don't you say no to yourself.
Yes.
I think that's philosophically a really thoughtful thing.
Yeah.
Others of you that have questions for Beth? Speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't see anybody. Last call. Well, I hope this was enjoyable for you. I hope you learned some things about this special lady. This time next week, Barbara Jordan, some of you may know Barbara. She is an internationally renowned wildlife photographer that lives here in Big Bear. And we're working to show you some of her pictures. Her pictures have been on the cover of National Geographic, and she is a heavy hitter. And we're working with Tori so that we can show you some of these pictures and find out how she avoided getting eaten by that alligator that she got the picture of. And she's a really fascinating lady, and you're going to see some fascinating pictures of wild animals that she has taken. And so I hope you'll all join us next Tuesday, 5:30. We'll be here with Barbara Jordan. Thank you for joining us. I hope this was worthwhile and enjoyable for you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Phill.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.